So we're looking at price elasticity demand and income elasticity demand together. So we have, sorry if you can hear that, there's a train going past my house. We have a demand curve from Unit 1, and it's downward sloping, so it's got a negative relationship between the price and the quantity. So we know if we increase the price of a product, it's likely that the quantity demanded will reduce, because it's logical, people will be able to afford fewer of them. But elasticity, or price elasticity demand, is measuring by how much will the quantity demanded fall when there's an increase in price, or how much will the quantity demanded increase when there's a drop in the price. So what we're doing first is we're altering the price, and then we're going to look and see how much demand the quantity demanded is going to change by. And we can see different scenarios just from these diagrams here. On the left we have relatively inelastic demand, and I'll go through what all those details mean in a sec. But inelastic demand, where if we go from P1 to P2, so we've increased the price, we see that the quantity demanded has fallen, but by a smaller percentage than the increase in price. Whereas we see with the relatively elastic demand, we see the price increase, but the quantity demanded has decreased by a larger amount than the increase in the price. It's only quite small there, but you can see if we drop the price a little bit more, so from P1 to P3, we see there you can definitely see there's a larger increase in the quantity demanded than the fall in the price. So first of all, to work out PED, price elasticity demand, or YED, you need to know how you work out percentage change. So the equation is just change over original. So say we change from £10 to £12, we know that the change is 2 over the original, which is 10, so that works out at 0.2, and if you times it by 100 you get it into percentages, which is 20%. So it's very, very important that you can work out percentage change. And the most common mistake here would be where students do change over the new rather than the original. So if you did 2 over 12, it's going to be a 6. I don't know what that is in percentages, but it's not the same as 20%. Okay, so the price elasticity of demand equation is percentage change in quantity demanded over percentage change in price. And common mistakes here are students putting price on top rather than on bottom. So whenever I'm teaching it, what I think in my mind is money's always the bottom line. So money always goes on the bottom. Anything to do with money in these equations goes on the bottom. So here's a little example that we can do about egg sandwiches, which are my favourite sandwich. So if the price changes from £1.50 to £1, so we've had a decrease in the price, and the quantity demanded increases from 200 to 250, what is the price elasticity of demand? So if we work through this, we've got percentage change here, we've got the change over original, so it's 50p change over original. We can see that it's a decrease, so it's a negative figure, and it's coming out as a third there. And then the quantity demanded changed from 200 to 250, so it's 50 over 200, 0.25 or 25%. And then if we put the 0.25 on the top, divided by the 0.33, which was negative, or you can do it in percentages, just make sure you're very consistent about that. So you can't have one of them as a percentage and one of them as a decimal, because it won't work out. And then you get a number. This is not a percentage. PED is not a percentage. YED is not a percentage. You'll just put it in decimal. It's a number, and it probably has some kind of decimal points after it as well. So let's have a look at what this means. Now I've already pre-done my slide, so you can see there that I'm saying that it's inelastic, but let's have a look at what that actually means. So we're looking at how responsive the quantity demanded is to a change in the price of a product. And because, if you think back right at the beginning to the first slide, because demand is downward sloping, the number we're always going to get is going to be negative. So if you get a positive number, there might be something that you've done a little bit wrong. But because PED is always negative, you don't actually have to put the negative in, because it doesn't really tell us anything about the number because it always is negative. So if there's kind of two things that you can really tell from PED. You can tell whether it's elastic or inelastic. So when it's elastic is where a percentage change in the quantity demanded is sensitive to a change in price. So a small change in the price will create a larger change in the quantity demanded percentage-wise. So if your number starts, if we go back to this, if the figure that you get starts with an actual number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's going to be elastic. If it starts with a 0, it's going to be inelastic. And it doesn't matter, as I said before, whether it's negative, because it should always be negative. So if it's above 1, as in it starts with 1 point something, or 2 point something, or 1.9 or 1.8, it's elastic. If it's lower than 1, 0, it's inelastic. So that's where a change in the quantity demanded is insensitive to a change in the price. So here we go. I've just made a list here of some elastic and inelastic kind of product features that you'd have, and I'm sure you can come up with some examples yourself. But an elastic product is just where the price is quite an important feature for the customer, and an inelastic product is where the price is not as an important feature as maybe some of the other things like branding. So elastic products will tend to be quite expensive relative to somebody's income, so people are quite sensitive to price changes. It could be very similar to competitors' products, so there's lots of substitutes for these products. So, you know, the only real difference between them is the price. And over the long run as well, if you're looking at buyer behaviour over, say, a year, people can change their habits if there's a little increase in price or a decrease in price. So that tends to make it more elastic. Whereas if it's inelastic, that it's usually cheap relative to someone's income, it might be quite heavily branded. So just going back to the point before, I always use the example of a box of matches. If that goes up by 100% in price, I doubt that the quantity demanded is going to drop by 100%, because actually a box of matches is about 24p, and I don't think it's going to break anyone's bank to spend 48p on a box of matches. Usually in the short run as well, you can't really change your buying habits that easily. So, for example, if you got to the petrol station in the morning and you notice that the price of petrol has gone up by 10p, it's not like you decide not to fill up your car that day. Usually if you've gone to the petrol station, you need to fill it up. But over the long run, you might look at alternatives like public transport. And addictive products, cigarettes, alcohol, the price will become less important to the person the more addicted they become. So here we have more elastic products. And if you imagine a line there, it actually looks like a capital E. So that's how you can remember this looks like an E. So the gradient is very flat on this demand curve, but it's still downward sloping. This would be a perfectly elastic curve, which is very kind of theoretical. This is where products are homogeneous and there's no difference between different businesses that produce products. So I suppose like a pint of milk's a pint of milk, isn't it? You know, semi-skimmed. I'm not really fussy about what business or what farm supplies me my milk, to be honest. And then you get, here's more inelastic. So if you imagine a little line there, it actually looks like a capital I, if you imagine a little line there. So this would be perfectly inelastic. So where price, maybe if someone is very, very addicted to a product, price doesn't feature in their kind of cost-benefit analysis of when you need to, when you're thinking about buying a product. And just in case you wanted to know, this is where PED equals 1 all the way around. So it's rectangular hyperbola. Now, in some Welsh Board notes that they did produce, they said that PED equals 1 where you get a kind of 45-degree demand curve, and that's actually incorrect. So just be careful if you notice that. These page numbers are taken from an economics book, so just be a little bit careful with those. But why is it, although it's very interesting, why is it important for businesses? Because it can help maximise revenue. So where PED equals 1, or to be completely accurate, be -1, that's where your revenue is maximised. So if that's one of your objectives, that could be quite good. So if you know that your product is elastic, so it starts with 1 point or 2 point or 3 point something, you know that actually by lowering the price, you're going to increase your revenue, because you can see there the red box, which represents price times quantity, which is revenue, is smaller than the green box. So we know by decreasing the price, if we know we've got a product that's elastic, we can increase the revenue gained. And the opposite is true if it's inelastic. If you increase the price, we can see this green box here is a lot larger than this red box here. However, there are some problems with using PED figures, because it's quite interesting, but you'd have to expect, if you were a business trying to actually work out whether your customers were quite sensitive or insensitive to price changes, you'd have to experiment with the prices, and this could be quite impractical. It could result in a loss of sales, and you might not have the time and resources to do an experiment. And also, you know, if you put the price up and there's a very elastic response to it in terms of the quantity demanded, how do you know that that has been because you put the price up? It could have been a bad news story in the press, or it could be a competitor releasing another product. You know, you never know that it's sort of isolated and completely caused by that price change. Okay, now looking at income elasticity of demand, or sometimes written as YED with letter Y. So these are some products that, well, this looks like quite a nice bike actually, but well, I'm going to come back to these pictures in a second actually, so that you can kind of understand this concept. But income elasticity of demand is measuring the responsiveness of the quantity demanded to a change in income. So exactly the same as PED, except rather than looking at price, we're looking at income. And we also can tell if something's income elastic or income inelastic. So income elastic is where the quantity demanded is sensitive to a change in income, and income inelastic is where quantity demanded is insensitive to a change in income. So exactly the same equation, except for instead of price, we have income. And I've got an egg sandwich example here as well. So imagine my income changes from £100 a week to £90 a week, and the quantity demanded changes from 200 to 250. So we've got a £10 change here. Now, unlike PED, we do need to be careful about whether the figures are positive or negative, because that can tell us a few different things as well about the figures. So we've got a £10 change, and that's decrease, so it's minus, divided by the original, which is 100, so minus 10% fall in income. We've got 50 over 200, which is 25. So when we put those figures in, because it's the percentage change in quantity demanded, so 25%, over the percentage change in income, so minus 10, we get minus 2.5. So it starts with a number, so again, it's the same as PED, it's elastic, so the demand for egg sandwiches is quite sensitive to a change in income. But it's also negative, and that means that it's an inferior product. Now, this isn't a judgment on the type of product it is, you know, in people's eyes, in people's perceptions, but an inferior product, I've not written this down, but you should make sure you know what the definition of an inferior product is. An inferior product is where income, if income increases, the quantity demanded would decrease, and if income decreases, the quantity demanded of this product would increase. Whereas a normal good acts in a more normal way. So if your income increases, you buy more of it, and if your income decreases, you buy less of it. So going back to these pictures that I showed you at the beginning, we can see here, this is a really old TV, like a black and white TV, and this is something you wouldn't really think of buying if you had an increase in your income. As with potatoes, this is quite a common example use of inferior goods actually. Potatoes, everybody, well, as far as I know, most people eat potatoes. But as your income increases, you start to introduce other things into your diet as well. So it might be meat or it might be fish, which is typically more expensive items of food. And you see that happening very much in countries like China now, where they're consuming a little bit more meat, still maybe consuming rice and carbohydrate-y things, but reducing their intake of that as their income goes up. And again, this looks like actually a very nice bike, might be more leisure purposes, but we'll see when people's incomes go up, they tend to get cars and things like that. So let's go forward to where